and if the stocks come back, not allowing them to go in, because now you're going to have some new qualifying year or something, they're not going to qualify. Maybe you're going to try to set up a general category qualifying years, which I don't think's right either. I mean, the idea was to set up when the draggers went along with it, which I didn't think was fair myself, but apparently some did, went along with the idea that, okay, we're going to give you 400 pounds as a scalloper, I mean a dragger, to you can have to compensate for the fact that you can no longer target scallops exclusively, though there's some guys, small boats, that are making, it's been the only thing that's been keeping them going is general category, going after the 400 pounds, which I think they should be allowed to still do. In fact, some of the big boats now, and I'm sure you council members are aware, are not only do they get their so many pounds that they're allowed under their access permits, but then when they're done that, they put on two crews, or they have two crews running, and get the 400 pounds to try to wipe out the general category quota off of New Jersey and stuff like that. They were running out with their two 16-foot dredges or whatever they wanted to do, or 14s or 15s, and it wasn't limited on the size of the dredges down there. I mean, how much total you could tow. Up here it's 10 feet, of course, but down there, so they could get their 400 pounds in maybe one or two tows. They'd run in, and the crew would do it for 3 or 4 days, and 3 or 4 guys would go on the other boat and do that. So I mean, that's a inequity right there, that they're allowed to do that, and also have the limited access too. I mean, really, personally, I think it should be, there shouldn't be any of that way of doing things. Either you've got to biologically set a limit. Forget about, I think you let economics play its part, and don't let a few guys be rich and the rest of us be all poor. You get back to where people are efficient, and small crews, and they're multi-purpose, like a small harbor needs to be. Go after the different fish when it's biologically sound and economically sound for the fishermen to be able to do it. But anyway, I could babble on for several weeks about what needs to be done. By the way, just as a go-around about letting people know what I was did serve 3 years in the service. Was a year as an officer in Vietnam, and back in '68, '69. I was in the state legislature in Massachusetts from let me see, when was this? I was the youngest legislator up there. I got elected in 1969 and served 70, 71, and 72. It took my father's place, who was also a commercial fisherman, but later life he was a state representative and died in office, and I took his place coming out of Vietnam at 24. He was a selectman for 30-odd years here in town, Chilmark. Then was a state rep. I took his place on the Natural Resource Committee up in Massachusetts. At that point, we also used to go lobstering. Well, that's another one. I'm going to put that in while we're at it. I've had a Massachusetts Coastal Access lobster permit for close to 40 years now, and because I didn't land lobsters in the qualifying years for how many pots you could have, I've got a coastal access permit, but I can't set any. I got zero allocation for pots, so I guess I got to buy somebody's pot allocation in order to, if I want to go lobstering again, which I wanted to have, with the idea that one of my kids, I've got 5 kids, 3 boys, and the youngest is 11, the oldest is 31, and one of them might want to pick up the fishing. And so I've held on to the lobster license, which cost me more money than the other licenses, for 30-something years. And now they're telling me I still got the lobster license, but I can't set any pots. But I can catch the 500 lobsters dragging, not in state waters, of course, but on federal waters. But I can't set any pots. So if I want to get rid of this boat and go lobstering, I got to buy up some newcomer's allocation that he got allocated for some pots, some limit of pots that they put on. So there's another injustice that's been perpetrated on the people that really went fishing and have generations of fishing. Our family's been on the island since 1642. They went whaling back in the 1650s and 60s. Went sword fishing since in the 17, 1800s, 19. They went my father, and he was on a schooner, went sword fishing in the 1920s on Georges. In fact, we were harpooning swordfish before they even knew about swordfish down in Florida. They didn't even know there were swordfish down there. They didn't even know what they never even sold them in Florida. All the swordfish that were landed were caught by a harpoon up here, and there was a big fleet of boats. Back in the 50s, there were boats from Canada in the 40s that would come from Canada, land in Menemsha, and work their way from Montauk all the way up to the Canadian waters around Memorial Day. They started. If you look at some of the old pictures, I don't know whether Tom's going to be able to show them some to you, but there'd be 40 or 50 harpoon boats in here. If we could get it back to where it was harpoonable again, it would be good not only for the commercial fishermen, but it would be good for the yachtsmen. It used to be in the 50s and early 60s, before longlining really got going. There were a lot of swordfish day boats that would go out here and catch swordfish. I mean, I harpooned right within sight of the vineyard over 20 swordfish in one day, and all averaging over 200 pounds, 250 pounds average. Beautiful swordfish coming in much better quality than you're going to ever get on a longliner that's been out on the Grand Banks or here on anywhere on the East Coast where they're out for 8 or 10 days and the fish are in warm water. You don't get good quality fish. People say harpoon fish always taste better. Well, part of the reason is they're caught in cold water for the most part, and harpoon, and they don't stay in the water long, and they get cooled off quickly when you bring them aboard, bleed them, and just top quality fish. And people would line up for harpoon swordfish over some longline fish. And it's a way, it would actually be a way of counteracting some of the foreign imports, which quality is not as good. As you probably know, even the frozen fish that are coming in, other fish that are coming in, are not the quality of good fish. And the smaller boats actually only fish 2 to 3 days a lot of times. Even a boat like us, where the more family-run boats might have much better quality fish than a boat that's staying on Georges for 8 to 10 days, especially in the summer. I think a lot of guys know that the quality we don't get paid anymore most of the time when we sell in New Bedford for the good quality fish. We should, but we don't for the most part. And I do think that this idea of trying to have some sort of either sector management or the idea of, I think we need to have, like, instead of a farmer's market, a fish market type of a thing where fishermen can sell their catch directly to the consumer. Because even on the vineyard here, we're getting fish that people think is locally caught, but it's coming from Canada, South Africa, all the other places. And people say, well, which one of the markets do your fish go to? Well, they don't buy our fish here, our fresh fish, because they'd have to fillet it and do all this other stuff. They buy it all filleted and pickled or whatever from, preserved and dipped in some sort of a solution over from New Bedford or Boston, and they're selling it as local caught fish, when there is very little local caught fish that's actually sold here to the summer people. So it's a kind of an injustice that way too. And I think if we could set it up somehow that we had fresh fish come in, and it would bring the young people coming along back to nature a little bit, much like the organic farming is going. And I think that it's a trend towards that, and not importing it from China. I think that we need to do more of that with the shrimp too. The shrimp coming from the guys down south are trying to work on that. Wild caught shrimp are much better quality than the farm raised stuff that's raised with pollutants and things from Thailand and China and all that sort of thing. There should be a definite distinction. Those fellas shouldn't be put out of business because their cheap imports are coming in. If people were aware that they're going to get a much better quality product from local fresh caught fish, we might be able to compete a little better with the Canadian fish and some of the other fish that are coming in too. So I think this idea of trying to set it up so you don't lose your heritage, you don't lose the connection that people should have with the ocean. And if the fishermen that were working had this connection with the ocean, they're going to have more of a feeling of stewardship, where you're going to, without the regulations, you're going to want to have good quality fishing coming along for future generations. I mean, my idea was never to try to catch the last fish. You wanted to have it come along so that you'd see your kids come along and be able to go fishing. And the way it's set up now, we're losing that, and it's just a shame. There's some guys that own 20 to 30 draggers in New Bedford or more. They're buying up the permits so the guys can't make a go of it, and they know that eventually they might be able to make money at it. And you know, they're bragging about how they're buying up these permits, and even some of the scallopers are, you know, different corporations. There's guys that got a whole bunch of scallopers going now too, and they've lost they've got guys running the boats, but they've lost that whole connection to the sea of stewardship of protecting the thing. Instead of having all this, you know, having to have all these different areas, you wouldn't have had to do all the things. So these days at sea thing is crazy. The way you're talking about cutting back days at sea even more now. So it's going to be that much harder as we can't go scalloping and do these different things to make a living. It's just driving us out. I'm sort of near the end of my career now. I'm like, I would say I'm 61, almost 62, and it's you know, I've seen a terrific amount of change, and unfortunately, it's sad to see the way it's gone, and I think that you know, I don't see a bright future unless we do make some adjustments to, you know, the way we're going now with this you know, just limited entry for just a few guys that can qualify when you pick these certain years. I've heard rumors there's even going to be some of that going on with general category scallops, and maybe even like codfish. If you didn't land enough codfish, well, I'm probably not going to do that because I went squidding, and I landed some squid and did that, or I went after something else, and so I could see me being limited to going for very little stuff, maybe a few yellowtail and a few squid. Maybe I won't be able to catch the cod anymore like I used to. It's quite frustrating, and I'm sure that there would be plenty of local guys from up and down the coast that would be glad to give you some more advice if you could put out some sort of feeler or proposals or what you think maybe you could do. I think some of us, especially, it's difficult because if you're still trying to make a living, to go to these meetings, you're not making the money and stuff. That makes the hardest point. It's the fleet owners are the ones that can afford to go and do all these things. You know, very difficult for myself right now. I'm just going two-handed with myself and my middle boy is 25, and we're going, and we can't afford to miss and go overnight up to Boston or somewhere to a council meeting. And even though it'd be fun to get up there and talk to some of the fellows and go out to dinner and have a non-alcoholic beer or something and talk over some of the fishing problems, but it's a frustrating situation anyway. So,
Greg, thanks.
Yep.
I appreciate it. The people of the island appreciate it. We'll carry this word to Portland, Maine.
I hope so.